All right, think we are live. Welcome, guys. Hope you can see me clearly and hear me clearly. Let me know if so. Let me tidy everything up here. Should be good. All right. Is my voice clear, guys? Can you help out? Stream clear? Awesome. I actually wanted to use another application so I can share my screen, but something kind of went wrong here. So I will not be able to share my screen this time. It's okay. We'll be me and some of your questions, and maybe also me searching a little bit about a few questions I had that I wanted to include in my book that I'm actually writing now. So a little bit of an explanation of what is the book going to be about. So first of all, I had this idea about the book because, especially after helping out with a few documentaries that I was in, because I noticed that these documentaries that I helped make, they were kind of like telling a story. And I just believe that this story that I can also show in the documentary can also be shown or shared through a book. And besides that, I love reading books so much. So like being able to write my own, is something I'm super passionate about now. So yeah, I have many ideas that I want to include in the book, but this is my first book ever, and I'm not the best writer out there, not even close. And what I have in mind is something like, I know the books that exist. I mean, I know many of the books that exist on the Samaritans now. There's not many out there, I'm sure. But even the ones that were written by some Samaritans. I until now I haven't seen any book that was written by a Samaritan that actually goes through basically like a first person perspective of how it is like to be a Samaritan, growing up in the Samaritan community from childhood and so on, learning ancient Hebrew and learning poems and history. So I think this is the direction that I want to take the book to. There are great books out there, don't get me wrong, about the Samaritans, and I highly recommend many of them. I'll share with you some of my favorites in the future. But I think this book that I'm writing now, it's going to be something like a kind of like a story, but also informative. And there's a lot of people that have many questions that I think I can answer through this book, and so on. So what I can also tell you about it, like for example, the more I write, the more ideas I get, but at the same time, I don't want to just throw information out there. What I noticed, for example, one of my the challenges, for example, in the book, is that there are some things that maybe are hard to articulate, like for example, the melodies that we have. Like some words, for example, take a long time to sing, but that doesn't help the reader experience what I really actually mean. So there's I'm looking for a way to kind of make the reader actually feel what being a Samaritan is. I mean, or growing up as a Samaritan, and also I think there's the way I see it is that there's also a lot of misunderstanding about the Samaritans. Some people, I mean, I've read really crazy things online. Like some people think, I don't know where did I read this comment, but some people thought that we only made baby boys like survive instead of baby girls at some point. That's why we have more men than women, which is absurd. But that's just one example that I read, and it's the internet, I guess. So I mean, you can find many people. All right. So I've seen some of your questions, guys, on one post I posted on YouTube, And don't get me wrong, I'll answer some of these. But I'm also always interested to know more about what people are curious about, because I grew up in the community, and I grew up having a lot of tourists in my neighborhood, and that got me the opportunity to talk with many of those tourists, and that brought up really interesting subjects, and that got me also interested to know more about my community. There's a lot of interesting things that I want to learn more about. Like, for example, today I had this idea of searching about if the Samaritans ever had a king, because a lot of people say that we never had a king, and it turned out that we actually did have. We had two kings. I'll share more about that in the future, but like, I'm still searching about it. But that's one interesting subject. I really want to know more about some scholars. I'm very passionate about one scholar. His name was Marke. He's one of the most probably the most respected scholar in the community, Marke. And also he wrote really beautiful poems. And there's also one of the Samaritan leaders. His name is Baba Rabba. That's one really interesting thing. So, all right, what are the Samaritans' perspective on Zionism and Judaism? Would be a great chapter. I mean, yeah, I do get asked about that. Like, what do Samaritans think about Zionism and Judaism? First of all, Zionism, I mean, it's kind of like a movement that happened much after the Samaritans or the Israelites came, and there is not a unique perspective on Zionism, but I can tell you that, I mean, we, particularly if we're living in Nablus, for example, like we do now, the ones that are living in Nablus, being called a Zionist is actually has a kind of like some kind of negative notion to it. We do, like, for example, I see the meaning of, like, for example, for the Jewish people to have the right to live in their own land. I respect that, because we and the Jewish people, again, this is also related to Judaism. We have Torah. We share the same beliefs. But today, it depends on, like, for example, what do you mean by Zionism? I guess so. Some people will not like it if I say that we support Zionism, or I guess it really what is meant by Zionism in a sense. So I get asked a lot about, like, if you're Palestinians or if you're Israelis. Answered this question many times. I will definitely talk more about it in the book. Special chapter. Curious whether you think of modern Judeans as long lost cousins, in particular, since they go by maternal descent. Maybe you think they are not all Israelites. So that's a good question, because, see, the Samaritans, we believe that we are descendants of the tribes of Ephraim and Menashe, the two sons of Joseph, and the tribe of Levi. For example, I'm from the Cohen family, so we believe that, for example, if you're from the Cohen family, you're from the Levites. So, to answer your questions, we do believe that the Jewish people are, in a sense, our long lost cousins, because they are from from the tribe of Judah, thus the name Jewish, right? So, in that terms, if people are really from the tribe of Judah, technically, yes, they are our long lost cousins. However, do many Jewish people believe that we are their long lost cousins? Not many believe that, but I've met many that do, and there's also, like, to be honest, I think that most Israelis really never heard about the Samaritans, as crazy as this might sound. I mean, I might be wrong, but at the same time, I'm telling from experience that most people I've told don't know, although I think the newer generation are the ones who don't know much. The older generation seems to recognize Samaritans more. Baba Rabba, where was he buried? I think, good question, because he was exiled, I think, to Rome Baba Rabba. And I think he died in prison over there, but I'm not sure if he was buried over there. So good question. That's something that I want to research more about. Was Kilab a convert? Dvarim, I'm not sure. Kilab. You mean Kilab, the son of Yefani? Kilab ben Yefani? I'm not sure. I will need to search for that. What are the needs in your community? So if you mean by like needs, like what are we looking for in the future or something? If that what you mean, then the community is looking to, first of all, of course, keep the traditions in the community alive and have a strong community. That's definitely a strong need. And we believe we can get this by basically sharing the same purpose. In some ways, we have to share the same purpose. But that's, I guess, what most of the Samaritan communities needs is basically being a good example for the other nations, also to kind of be a light around among the nations. Although we're only 850 today, but I mean, I think that's one need we might have. And if you mean struggles, well, as a community, this is something I wanted to include in the book, because like what kind of challenges are we facing today? Today we're facing some challenges, like I think, the marriage is something that was more problematic 20 years ago, but now we can marry from outside the community, because technically it was really the women who converted, for example, from Ukraine. They proved that they can keep the religion really passionately, and they can teach their children about it. And this is something that was kind of feared from before Samaritans married women from outside the country. And today we have like 15, almost more than 15 Ukrainians by now. So I'll talk more about that. We have other struggles, I guess, but does their community struggle with poverty? No, no. Like, thank God we're doing really good. All right, I'll rephrase my question. Would you find it acceptable to marry a Jew under your religion? Would they need to convert, or are they already Israelite according to your religious law? We do accept women who are Jewish, but they still have to convert to become Samaritan, because there are some differences in the Samaritan religion than the Jewish religion. I mean, first of all, we do have a different Torah. I mean, even though the differences are small, we have like 30 small differences and 5,000 minor differences, like, for example, in some words here and there, that I will share with you guys in the future. For example, there's one word that can be missing one letter, but the whole meaning of that word can change. However, if a Jewish woman does convert to become a Samaritan, then she at least has to raise her children about what, for example, the Samaritan beliefs. For example, we have Mount Gerizim, right? Instead of Jerusalem, these kinds of things. So until now, the woman that is coming from the Jewish background, of course, the Samaritan men will respect her, and her, her passion for the Jewish religion. But at the same time, she's expected also to, learn about the Samaritan religion, because in the end, the woman will also probably raise the child maybe more than the man, right? I mean, that's what the community expects. So Baba was not buried in Rome, maybe Constantinople or similar location in the area on the coast. Well, that's a good subject to research, Larry. Thank you for bringing that up. I'm very passionate about this leader, Baba Rabba. I really wonder because of one of the reasons why I am writing this book is that I want to dive deeper into the Samaritans' history, because we have a lot of, let's say that we believe we've been here for 3,600 years in this location on Mount Gerizim, near Nablus. And there are some spots during our years that we really do not know what happened, right? And I think that's really a fascinating subject to research. Like, for example, like how many Samaritans were there exactly 2,000 years ago, and where were they living around? And because I'm sure you know, some of you know that there's different beliefs of where Samaritans come from. So, what is the conversion process? Do they need a mikvah? The conversion process, well, they don't need a mikvah, but let's say that when she comes to the community, after the man kind of, explains that he's a Samaritan, and that she, has to be willing to convert if he's to marry her, then the conversion process is really that she has to move with him, with his family, at least for a few months, sometimes 6 months, and then the husband, the soon-to-be husband, asks her and has to see if she's okay with it, if she has any challenges, and he has to guide her. And at some point, the actual marriage ceremony is the conversion, as many people will see it. So there's not an actual specific ceremony of like, ta-da, you're a Samaritan. We don't have that. So take that into account. Okay. A church was buried over his tomb. Oh, really? Oh, okay. I think I heard about it, but that's awesome to know. I mean, interesting. Do Samaritans believe in mysticism, or do Samaritans believe in reincarnation? I think is what you meant to say. Well, I'm not sure if we believe in mysticism, although I know that there's, I don't think we have mystics, if that's what you're asking. Although I sometimes use the word mystical in some of like what we believe, like for example, our pilgrimage and our Passover has this kind of mystical experience about them, but that's, I think, a different thing what you meant. Do we believe in reincarnation? No, not really. I don't think I ever read about it, and we've never been told, like growing up, that our souls kind of reincarnate into another one, another body. So, not as far as I know. But definitely, who knows? Like, I'm still learning, and who knows what's out there. Has there been any archaeological excavations done in Mount Gerizim? There's many. There's actually many archaeological diggings still happening. Believe it or not, there's one next to my home. It's like wake up every morning and I see like there's diggings around, and there's many really interesting ones. And actually, if you go to the top of the mountain, there's an archaeological site that's basically a huge archaeological site with a. There's a book out there up there that they sell on top of the mountain where we live, which has about 400 to 500 pages. Each page, or each 2 or 3 pages, describe a tablet that had ancient Hebrew on it, and it translates it. I mean, 90% of those tablets had Samaritan Hebrew on them, I think. And it has like this image of infrared that makes it easier for the reader to see the actual ancient Hebrew letters over there, and super interesting. So that's also one thing I really want to include in the book, because the archaeology is really interesting about Samaritans. There's a Samaritan synagogue that's about 2,000 years old that was discovered, I believe, in the north, and there's ways to know if it was a Samaritan synagogue or not. Sometimes by the writings over there, but sometimes by the direction of I forgot how do you call it, but basically where the cantor prays, the direction of that should be towards Mount Gerizim. So Is there a concept of ritual purity or of mikveh? Well, of course we do have a ritual. We have a ritual. We don't call it mikveh. We might have had something like a mikveh in the past. Maybe it was removed after we don't have the Mishkan anymore, the temple. But the purity ritual is mostly done by either men or women. Men before prayer, and women after they finish either their monthly period or when they have a birth for a boy or a girl. For example, we have to read specific verses while basically while cleaning, like with water, our hands, heads, like face, mouth, nose, and feet, right? And we have, for each, for example, body part, we read a specific verse, and we do that every time before we pray on each specific prayer. So, for example, we have 4 prayers on Shabbat. We read those verses and clean with water before each of those prayers. There's different rituals also that I will share in the future. What are Samaritans' beliefs about male facial hair? I mean, the actual belief about it is that, first of all, let me tell you that today there's not much strict rules about it. As long as it's you just don't take it to extreme levels, I guess, of doing really weird things with your facial hair. I think that's okay. But the actual, let's say, I think the Torah talks about you're not allowed to use razors, right? You're not allowed to use razors. I think especially for the Levites, to kind of like actually do something with the knife to kind of to shape your beard or something in a specific way. But today there's not much strict rules about it. We're not allowed to do tattoos though, I think. So that's the only thing. Okay, so we have a question from Pinchas. Can you also share information about the Samaritans that lived in Europe, and also the history and about communities throughout Israel, maybe around the world? Definitely, Pinchas. I will share about that in the book, because that's one of the really interesting subjects I'm excited to write about. Benny Tzedaka will definitely help in that, I'm sure, because I did read about some Samaritans living in Greece. And that's really interesting, because I was in Greece a few months ago, and like all during that week that I was there, I was like, oh wow, interesting. Samaritans were here. They had a community here, and you wonder, like, wow, how did they get there, and why did they get there, and how was life like over there? So I'm excited about it, and of course other communities throughout Israel, because we do know that there was not only Samaritans here, but there was even Samaritans in Jerusalem, as I've read somewhere. So I would like to know more about that. Definitely up for a research on that. What about palm reading? We do not exactly have palm reading connected to the Torah or to anything like really by Samaritan belief, but some Samaritan priests practiced it. And I don't really know if this is inherited by our Samaritan ancestors, or if it's written anywhere, connected to Samaritanism. So I think it's more of a personal thing that those priests maybe wisely learned from other priests, but that's only my take on it. Is it allowed for Samaritans to eat meat with dairy? No, it's not actually, because we also are not allowed to drink milk. If we eat meat for about 3 hours, we're not allowed to do that. And if we eat meat, we're not allowed to drink milk or eat anything that contains milk for at least 7 hours. Add a donation link to your YouTube, whatever makes you go towards. We will. Thank you, Mindy. I will definitely. This would help out, give me even more time to do this YouTube thing. Can the sanctuary be rebuilt? Can Samaritans take a consensus? I like that you use the word tent and not temple, because a lot of people do ask if we have a temple. I mean, yeah, that's We are basically, the belief is that the tent or the tabernacle, or what many might refer as the temple. We believe that when the Ta'ib, his name is basically the Ta'ib or the Messiah. Some people might refer to him as the Messiah. We call him Ta'ib. When he comes back, he will reveal this tent on Mount Gerizim. It is believed that it has been hidden somewhere around Mount Gerizim. Some people say somewhere in a cave. Like, that's what the mystics say. No cheeseburgers. No, unfortunately. And no pizza pepperoni, I think it's called. I mean, yeah. We can eat cheeseburgers, but without meat. If that works, I'm not sure. Do you sometimes visit Awarta? Yes, that's definitely one of the most visited places for us, because that's where, as you might know, the first Samaritan high priest was ever buried. His name is Elazar, who was the son of Pinchas, right? The high priest Pinchas. And Pinchas was the son of Aaron, who was the brother of Moses. So Elazar is like one of those closest people to the biblical, to the Torah, basically, to those people who lived in the Torah times. And we do go there, and we have dinner sometimes there. We're singing ancient Hebrew. It's a beautiful time to go there, at least once or twice a year. I love going there. Did I miss a question over here? What's your concept of rebuilding the temple on Mount Gerizim, King Yonahan heard? Okay, so that's like the same question, I think, that I answered a few minutes ago. And there's differences. Some people believe that we had one temple. Some people believe that we had a second one built. However, we believe that we only had one. Some researchers believe that the archaeology kind of said that we might have had two, but we believe the second place that they think might be a temple, we believe it was just a synagogue. So there's different beliefs over there. The verse that has to do with tefillin, how do you interpret it? I actually, and you also have it. Vekashartem lut al yedecha v'ayu al tatafot benenecha. I actually answered this question like yesterday. Some guy from the US asked me to record it for a radio interview. So the way that we interpret this verse, that you shall put them on, kind of like, I don't know, how does someone know how do we exactly translate the word leot, vekashartem leot? Because we do know it's the black kind of like tape looking thing. I forgot how, because I do know it's lot. Tefillin, we know a sign. All right, thank you. So it's a sign. So the way that we interpret this is like this. We do not take it more like physically. So we do not put it we don't put anything physical between our eyes or the actual sign on our hands. It's more taken as, for example, as taking it wherever you go in your mind. Wherever you go, you see it. You remind yourself, in a sense, kind of like, there's a verse that says "Vikashartem lut al levavecha," right? Or let me rephrase that again. So you can't actually physically do that to your heart, right? But the idea that we get from that verse is that, that you don't forget, that you take it everywhere. So it's taken more spiritual. Hope that helps. Interesting about meat and milk, it implies at least some oral Torah, because the verses in the Torah only mention young goat in its mother's milk. Yeah, true. And we ended up also believing in the same way as the Jewish people. We might have been affected by their beliefs, or it may be even the opposite. Some people say, who knows? However, we do believe that, like, the Levites are the ones who kind of like decide what to do with verses, and that's what the Levites, at least when that's how they interpreted this term. And some people will argue, like, why does it matter that if it's only cooking the lamb in its mother's milk? Why does it matter? Well, there's many other verses that are interpreted differently. So We'll share more about that. Do Samaritans consider Jewish Kohanim to be descendants of Aaron? Yeah, basically, we believe that half of the tribe of Levi went to the south. So basically, half of the tribe of Levi are, in a sense, what are known today as Jewish. So we do believe that there is a connection between the Samaritan Kohens and the Jewish Kohens, and some DNA evidence actually proved that. I mean, that's at least some of the articles I've read. So I'll share more about that, and also about DNA. That's really interesting, Samaritan DNA. All right, so the Samaritans were not allowed to help build Zerubbabel's temple, correct? They complained to the Persians. I've read about this, yeah. Although I'm not sure if they asked to help. Did they ask to help build? Because was it? Oh, it's Ezra 4. I need to check that actually. And where was it supposed to be built? Because if they asked to help, then I guess they believed originally that it should be on Mount Gerizim, Jerusalem. That's really odd that they asked to help to build it on Jerusalem, but I want to know more about that. Because, throughout 3,600 years, the Samaritans had the belief that the holy place is Mount Gerizim, and this is where it should be built. Okay. I don't think we have one. Will the Samaritan Mashiach be a Kohen or from the tribe of Ephraim that you waiting for? Mystical order of Israel. So basically, we believe that not only we, but basically the scholars and our sages believe that this type, the person who will reveal the temple or the tabernacle one day, he is actually from the two tribes of Joseph, is what is believed. I mean, that's not exactly written in the Torah, but our sages believe that. So, can you also share some about the clothes used by the community in general and on Shabbat? Is there a difference between the Levites and the other tribes? Really good question. So, I wish I could share my screen here and show you, but at the same time, I will describe for you a little bit. So, the Samaritans who are from the Kohen family, they are allowed to wear a specific hat that is called the misnefet, which is like the hat that has this white, kind of like clothing around the red hat. So that's only for the Kohen family, and especially the ones that has the white one, we only wear on Shabbat. If it's not Shabbat, we only wear the ones that are red. And this is mostly for the people who are like on the older age or like probably more than 50 years old, or 45 years old, something like that. But if you're not from the Cohen family, there's still a special tarbush, or like how do you say tarbush in fez, right? This fez is worn also by the non-Kohens. Like, for example, I wear a fez when I go to the synagogue or if it's during a prayer. But if you're from the non-Kohen family, there's a specific kind of clothing that you can put around the fez when you're older than 45. It's even like a more respected, kind of like the misnefet, but a little bit more different. And of course, the clothing of the actual clothing is different. In festivals, we have different colors that we wear, like the green and the blue and the purple, kind of like an example for like expression of happiness, if you want to call it. So, and also the talit that we wear, it's kind of like a white robe that we have that has different kinds of, not different kinds, but many small kind of like fur balls. 22, it's to be specific, not many. 22, and it's kind of like a sign for the 22 for the 22 Hebrew letters. So that's one of the things that we have on the clothing. I love the Shabbat clothing. It's really comfortable to wear. Just puts you in a really relaxed mood to pray and meditate. Okay. The bride is Samaritan, the woman at the well. I'm not sure what you mean here, Mindy. Although, if you mean by the woman at the well, I think you mean when Jesus spoke to the Samaritan woman at the well. But if that's a question, you can clarify it. The Masoretic text speaks of kings in the northern kingdom. Did Samaritans embrace these men as their kings? So I talked a little bit about it a few minutes ago. That I just discovered that we actually had two kings, but I'm learning more about that, and I'll share more in the future. Okay, let's see. There is an ancient Middle Eastern dish that involves cooking a goat in goat milk. Maybe that's where the meat and dairy mixing restrictions come from. So this is one interesting thing that also, like, a little bit of touching about that subject of dairy and meat. One Samaritan sat with me this one time, and he was like, I have this cool story I want to tell you of why did basically God prohibit the eating of meat and dairy. So he said this weird thing that some people might find disturbing, but there was like at those times, 3,000, maybe 2,000 years ago, the enemy, like, some people would have wars against each other. Nations would have wars against each other, and to inflict fear upon the next or the other, side, some people would kind of like, I think it was something like, what's the word? Give a threat that we will cook your babies with their mother's milk, something like that. I think, as disturbing as that might sound, but I think that's what he believes, and maybe, who knows, that has something to do with that. So, but of course, no, chicken. Well, chicken is also considered meat. So we have the same thing. If we eat meat, we're not allowed to drink meat, milk. Sorry. Gerizim doesn't really practice oral traditions, but Samaritans do. Yeah, we do have our own oral traditions. We just don't call it oral Torah. It's just a way to kind of like, it's almost like what the Torah says: ask your fathers and they will tell you. And like, which books of Tanakh do you believe in? We only have the first 5 books of Moses, but it doesn't mean that we completely deny all the other books. They might help us, for example, interpret the history that we have. There's also prophets that came that went to the Jewish people, maybe to guide them to a specific thing to do. But we only believe that, like, the actual divine thing that was the divine book was given to Moses. That's how it's believed in the community, and that was on Mount Sinai. So, but again, that's not really neglecting all the other books and all the wisdom that they have to offer. That's something that we really respect. They lived in Samaria but were Jews. Real Samaritans that worshipped at Gerizim would not have went to Jerusalem. A good thing that's a good point, Larry. That's why I'm like interested to know more about, because Samaritans were very passionate and are still very passionate and very, their belief is really strong in Mount Gerizim. So, if a Jewish Levite converted to Samaritanism, would it be possible for him to be included in the Samaritan Levite rolls? Good question. No, I don't think that would be that easy. I don't think that would be that easy, because it's still also, there's a community part that he has to prove that he, having the genes, let's say, might not be enough, is what I'm saying. Having the genes of the Kohens or something, it might not be enough. But it's a good question. I want to ask our elders and see what they react to. All right. So I thought the cloth around the fez was just for the elders of the family. Well, it's actually not necessarily for the elders of the family. People can put them if they're older than 40, 45, something like that. But it's specifically for the Kohen family. But the color of the clothing around the fez is the thing that matters. Because if the color was white, then only from the Cohen family they can wear it. If the color is more like kind of yellowish, then that's a different thing. So, all right. So in Judaism, we have a similar concept of Mashiach ben Yosef, but we are also waiting for Mashiach ben David. All right. What do you mean by concept of Mashiach ben Yosef? Is like another story about the Mashiach, maybe? Are you allowed to mix chicken or bird with dairy? Is bird considered meat? Yeah, I answered that. Yes, they are. Many of the prophets operated in the north. True, I do know that, but it's more like, for example, why do we not practice Hanukkah or Purim? I've been told by many of our elders that it's the same kind of like, because the idea is that a lot of the stories happened in the south, and some of the things that happened in the north are believed to have been more, in one way or another, kind of connected to the Jewish people. See, there's some people that say, for example, that there's like the sons of Ephraim in the north. Now, Ephraim is one of the sons of Joseph, so it's interesting to know if they were Samaritans or not. One thing I want to describe more in the book is like I want to show the two opinions of where the Samaritans are believed to be. I want to show our opinion, and I want to show, for example, the Orthodox Jewish opinion, and I even want to go to the third opinion maybe that exists out there that maybe talks about DNA evidence, right? Because I've read somewhere that Samaritans are connected to the Canaanites DNA wise, which is interesting because who knows, maybe they just don't have a gene that you can refer to that is Samaritan in that book of reference they have, so they connected to Canaanites instead. So, and I did a DNA test, 23andMe, by the way, so I'll share more about that in the future. It's really interesting to know. All right, Karaites also have their tradition. It's called Sevel Ha-Yerusha, and passed by fathers, but not explicitly when written in the Torah. Oh, interesting. I didn't know about that. Thank you for sharing, Tom. Do you encourage Gentiles to keep the commandments? Well, it depends how do you use the word encourage? Because we do not, we don't invite people to become Samaritans specifically. We might invite women if a man, wants to marry a woman, but we do not have like missionaries, if that's what you mean. Although if a neighbor lives like in the neighborhood, there's like people are more open to kind of like maybe explain to him some traditions. Are very kind of like what's written in the Torah, that you shall love your neighbor. And also there's it talks about the neighbors that are, reminds us of when we used to be neighbors in Egypt with the Egyptians. So there's some hint to that. So can you please recite the Shema in Samaritan Hebrew? I can, for example, show you like the first few verses. So in Hebrew, I could read you the first few verses. In Hebrew, we say in the Assyrian Hebrew, or the Hebrew that is recited by the Jewish people today, you would say Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, right? In ancient Hebrew, we would say, or Samaritan Hebrew, we say Shema Yisrael Shema Eloheinu Shema Ad. And if you look closely, there's an extra Shema. What is that? Like some people say, do you say Shema 2 times? Well, no. The word Adonai, which is the name of God in Hebrew, we don't pronounce it as Adonai. We say Shema. Shema is the name of God in the Samaritan Hebrew, because we're also not allowed to pronounce YHWH or Yud Hey Vav Hey. So we say Shema Yisrael, Shema Yisrael, Shema Eloheinu, Adonai Eloheinu. So here, O Israel, Shema Israel, Shema Eloheinu, the Lord our God, Shema Ad, the Lord is one. What is your opinion on the Jewish mysticism book, Sefer Yetzirah, in which says God created the world using the Hebrew alphabet? If you're asking about my personal opinion, I don't know if I read Sefer Yetzirah, but I've read a little bit, like really a little bit of the Zohar, and I've found some really interesting things. I like some interpretations there, but that was like less than 100 pages, and I'm still learning. I like to learn. I'm very open-minded to learning more about the Torah from other books. But Sefer Yetzirah, I heard it somewhere, but I don't think I've read it. And using the Hebrew alphabet, first of all, that's a beautiful thing, because that's really interesting. Because the way I see the world is, like it's consciousness, and consciousness is, if you think about it, it's also in some way that language is one property of consciousness, because we label things, right? We always label things, and only after we label them we can differentiate between things. And I think consciousness is the ability to differentiate between things, because if everything was one, then you would not have consciousness. Even the self, we'll talk more about this philosophical thing, but I love the concept of like using the Hebrew letters to create things. So, can you please recite the Shema? We did. When is it morning? From what time is it allowed to say morning prayer? So there is, like, let's say, here's a story for you, Pinchas. If you know, I'm sure you know the story of of Jacob when he wrestled the angel. When the angel basically, when the sun was just about to rise, the angel told him, leave me, right? I have to go, because he said, because the sun is rising. So I think it's just about when the sun is rising, just about when it's rising, that's morning. However, we do not have the actual, like rule that this is the actual time that you should pray. But as I told you, I've actually asked my father and my grandfather once. So, like, Grandpa, why do we wake up so early to pray, especially on Shabbat? It's 3 a.m. we pray. So I really remember this was like a long time ago. And he said that the angels prefer to pray at that time, which was 3 a.m. And then before that, basically, 3 a.m., because that's where the angels are. And then after 3 a.m., which is at 4 a.m., when the sun rises, they go. So that's why we wake up earlier, like than 3 a.m. and Shabbat specifically. But again, you can consider like an hour, 2 hours after that. Also, many Samaritans pray around that time, so it's 6 a.m., 7 a.m. The important thing is like the intention and the meditation and the prayer about it. Wait, who tested with family tree DNA in the Samaritan Cohen family then? I'm not sure who exactly, but there's some good articles that talk about it. There's no names that were mentioned as far as I know. Biblical, there are a number of studies done in the past. Oh, you're referring to him, that there's many Samaritans. Yeah, there's many studies done on the Samaritans DNA wise. Yeah. One thing is for sure is that the Samaritans overall have, especially the Kohens. I'm not sure if I've seen a DNA of non-Kohen of the Samaritans, and I'm sure they have the same as us. But we have like really high percentage of the Levantine, something like 95% Levantine. DNA, like for gene wise, I mean, if people want to go home eventually, it would be better for provide a DNA test. Do you encourage Genetals to do things like be faithful to your wife or covenanting isn't good? Yeah, the very we do. I mean, if there's people, if there's non-Samaritans today, if there's like non-Samaritans, they are most likely to be Muslims or Christians. So they're not really going to be encouraged to do one way or another. They have really like some rules that we really respect, and that's not really something that will make us go and encourage them to do things. But we can definitely, share the wisdom that we might have. What's the Samaritan concept of prophets after Moshe Rabbeinu, peace be upon him? Oh, sorry. And if so, which prophets are only for the Samaritans and not the Jews? I don't think there is anything that says that there's only prophets for the Samaritans. No, I don't think that happened. However, it is believed that, for example, at the end of times, I mean, in the sages, that Samaritan sages, for example, describe, some say it's the end of time. It's not necessarily like the end of time. It might be like the beginning of a new, era or world, if you want to call it. But at that time, when the type comes, that he will reunite all the tribes of Israel. So I don't think that that means that there's only prophets for the Samaritans. Never mentioned. Although there's like beliefs that, for example, that this prophet will reunite the tribes of Israel on Mount Gerizim. So that might be like, some people might think it's different. Who knows? If the type comes and tells us it's elsewhere, we'll follow him. But for now, the strong belief is on Mount Gerizim by the Samaritan community. Do Muslims, Druze, and Christians who are descendants of converted Samaritans recognize their ancestors' past? Good question. A lot of them acknowledged this, and a lot of them are proud about it. And they're also proud about their current religion, and we really respect that. But I think a lot of people here, when I say here, I mean like where I live and around the place, like some non-Samaritans, like for example from our Muslim friends and Christian friends, a lot of them might be Samaritans, like ex-Samaritans. Their families, their ancestors might be, but they don't know about it. And if they do know about it, then a lot of them are really proud. They share it. I mean, like I've talked with many of them, and some of them, like where their fathers or families did not convert to Islam, for example, a long time ago. It was something like 120, 140 years ago, maybe, which is not considered a long time. Like their most recent family that converted to Islam from the Samaritan community is known as the Muslimani family. And the Muslimani family, then the origin of the name, as I heard, is from the word or from the sentence Muslim Ani, which means I'm a Muslim, because they were calling them Samaritans and they would say I'm a Muslim, so it's Muslimani. We are gathered here on YouTube, sure. Thank you for the question, Messi. Ezra and Zerubbabel set about making up an alphabet of their own, different from the Hebrew alphabets. They made it of 27 characters. This is actually by Abul Fatah. Thank you for sharing that, Finchas. But Ezra and Zerubbabel. Is the Hebrew ones 27 actually? Or is it like because there's a beginning letter and an ending letter, like the Tzamich ending and the beginning? We'll need to see about that. Are there any architectural digs or research on Mount Gerizim to get a better idea of the earlier Samaritan temple, or is it too sensitive, sacred for that? Good question, Harley Davis. I mean, there's many archaeological diggings that talk about the Samaritan community and the Samaritan nation living on Mount Gerizim. So far, the evidence suggests that there was about, at least at some point, there was about 10,000 Samaritans living on the top of Mount Gerizim. But there's also still archaeological diggings happening that we don't know the results or anything of the evidence. And as far as I know, I still need to learn more about it. But I know that there's many really interesting things. And recently they opened up some sites. Just recently, like something like 6 months ago, they opened up a really interesting site on the top of the mountain, which the archaeologists believed it might be a house of a Samaritan high priest. There's different reasons why they believe that. They say that For example, one of the things is that it was seems like it was a really rich family, which was unlikely only the high priest would have that kind of power at that time, because it was really right next to the place where we believe the tabernacle or the temple was built. And other than that, there was a golden bell found. And guess who would be wearing a certain set of gold bells? If you guessed high priest, that's correct. It would be at the end of the rope. So I'll share more about that in the future. I'll ask there's a manager on the top of the mountain that actually it kind of like told me about the whole archaeology. Like, he gave me a tour on this place. It's really interesting to talk about, to learn about. He's talking about the 5 end letters. Yeah, that's what I was referring to. Is there a place to order prayer book in Samaritan in English? Well, I'm not actually sure about any prayer book in Samaritans, but there's the Torah only that you can find on Amazon, written by Benitza. So the translation of the Samaritan Torah. There were 2 faith worshipping on Gerizim. The one came from Jerusalem. The faithful ones that worshipped on Gerizim before the construction did not worship in it. Okay, do you believe in Northern Kingdom of Israel was always faithful to God? What about Elijah? All right, so if you mean by the Northern Kingdom of Israel, if you mean by like the tribes of Israel, or like, so like in our case, the Samaritans were in like the Northern Israelites, then there's some belief that there was this period that actually, even until now, that there's the period of non-divine. Forgot what's the word, the opposite of divine. Do tell us if what's the opposite of the word divine. But there's those days of divine where the temple or the tabernacle existed, and there's this period where the Samaritans or the northern tribes were not really obeying the commandments. So that's is believed to be one of the reasons why the tabernacle was removed until the divine days come back. So we'll talk more about that. Hello, OGRSS. Okay, so can you talk about Eli and Shiloh? So I actually want to learn more about that. The only thing that I know about Eli is that he, and that's how like one of the Samaritan sages talk about him, Abul Hassan. He basically wanted to oppose the high priest at that time, his name was Uzi. And Eli is believed to have had a lot of power, which included money, and also this Samaritan sage describes it as black magic. And he had also the power of speaking. He was basically a good speaker, and eventually he had this movement going to take away some tribes to Shiloh, and from there it escalated to Jerusalem. But that's I want to learn more about it and definitely write more in the book. I read more about it, but just need to have the information more and articulate it better for you. So we'll definitely include that in the book. What are the holidays that the Jews celebrate while you don't? We actually have only Hanukkah and Purim, and the Jewish people don't. So we have Passover, Sukkot, Shavuot, and all those festivals around it. But the ways that we practice those festivals is kind of a little bit different. For example, we have a different way to celebrate Passover. We have a different way to celebrate Sukkot. Although the original story is the same, but the actual kind of traditions is a little bit different. Will the book be in English or in Hebrew? It will be in English. I already wrote kind of like 25 pages in English, because I think, I will translate it to Hebrew at some point, and obviously probably to Arabic at some point, but it's in English. What happened? What happened to the Samaritans after the Jewish revolt against the Romans? Were they on the side of the Jews? Why did the local Samaritan population diminish so much after the Roman period? Well, I'll tell you. I mean, the Samaritans, most of the biggest reason why the Samaritan population went down is believed to have been because of the massacres that happened against them, specifically by the Byzantines. There were 3 big revolts that happened against the Byzantines. That's one of the major, let's say, reasons why the numbers declined. But if they revolted against, were they on the side of the Jews in the Romans? I'm not sure about that, but some people believe that we were on the side of the Romans. Never read that anywhere. I'm not sure why. Would they be that? Although some people will argue because they were enemies, but again, the Romans were not very friendly with the Samaritans either. In fact, they were also one of the worst enemies. They killed they're believed to have been the ones who killed the great leader Babaraba, Samaritan leader. But I would love to learn more about that. So thank you for bringing up that question. Is there going to be an audiobook of the Samaritan Pentateuch in its language? Cool question. Cool suggestion, actually, Pablo Marquez. I mean, we do have some Samaritan Pentateuch reciting in ancient Hebrew on YouTube. It's a little bit trickier to find. I try to share it here on my channel, but we have a huge library of Samaritan chantings. You need to search for, well, in Hebrew, like Havad Shomroni, which means the Samaritan Council, but translate it to Hebrew and then search for that. I'll try to share that on my YouTube community section. Can you convert into a Samaritan? Yeah, I mean, well, yes and no at the same time. Yes, in that we are open to anyone who wants to practice the things that we have, the beliefs that we have. It's not usually only about genetics, or like the bloodline or anything like that. So don't get that. We're not really strict on that. But at the same time, we do believe that sometimes, the history of the nation, the history of the ancestors do give you kind of like maybe the ability that you have grown up in the community since your childhood. So you have like this belief imprinted in you deeper. And what I'm trying to say is, like, we have people who convert, but they do not come live in the community. And that's something that still didn't happen. Maybe one family or 2 only did it, but they only come every week or so. There are some Samaritans around the world. I mean, we don't really, the community doesn't say that there are. That's one thing. But there are people who read about the Samaritans and they discovered that this is the belief that they want. And we really respect that. And we don't know if they are representing us in a good way. So this is why we're saying that we don't really know, because that's one of the reasons why I want to write the book, because I want to remove any misconception about other people around the world that might call themselves Samaritans, but actually might represent us in a not really nice way. But other than that, I know people around the world that ask me questions and they believe in the Samaritan religion, and I consider them basically really good friends and brothers. But at the same time, if they come here and they want to eat, for example, from the Passover meat that we have, which only Samaritans are allowed to eat at that time, unfortunately, it wouldn't be that easy for them to be accepted to eat. So the conversion is kind of like a really touchy subject. So I think I missed a few questions here. Do you have a tradition that Shechem is also called Shalem? Good question, David. Yeah, we do have some that, like we have. Yeah, but I'm honest. I remember one of the elders, the Samaritan elders, talked about it, that Shechem actually was known as Shalem. I'm not sure where did he get this interpretation from. Maybe because it says Shechem and then straight Shalem. Correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, my question earlier I meant is Caleb, as in Joshua and Caleb, saw the promised land. Was Caleb a convert? I don't think I read that somewhere, but I do know that Caleb, Ben Yefen, Yosheb, and they were the only ones who said that the land was good. The other ones that went to spy in the land with them, they warned against entering that land, but they were the only ones who said that it was good, and they were, in a sense, kind of like rewarded and loved by Hashem. So I think it's like there's a lot of interesting subjects I want to share about. One of those I think I want to include is that I want to include like a certain passage after each chapter in ancient Hebrew, and then kind of have the interpretation on it. And then when I make the audiobook about it, maybe I can read that also in ancient Hebrew, because that's one thing I've read on. If you guys ever heard about this this new tool that is out there, ChatGPT, I think it's called, this AI chatbot. I asked it, for example, what is ancient Hebrew, or I think I asked it what is Samaritan Hebrew, and then it says like talked a little bit, and then at the end it said it's like an endangered language, and it makes sense. Maybe, it's because there's only, I don't know many people other than the Samaritans that still have Samaritan Hebrew or ancient Hebrew, but that's an interesting thing to know about. How commonly do Samaritans use Arabic names? Is it as common as other Arabized Palestinians, like Christians with non-Islamic Arabic names, like Nasser, or Muslim with Arabic Islamic names like Ahmed? We do. For example, my name is Aboud, is an Arabic name, short for Abdallah, and we use them pretty commonly. But today we also have, for example, the ability. People are more open to use more non-Arabic name. Like we have, like Mira. I don't think is only Arabic. It can also be mean something. What else do we have that are none? Like we have, I think we even have like Alexandra now, although she's a daughter of a Ukrainian convert of the Samaritans. But overall, we were not only strict to Arabic. For example, I was named Aboud after my grandfather, so his name is Abdallah also, and my father's name is Arabic, and so on. But the ones who live in Tel Aviv and Holon, they use Hebrew names. So I just posted passages. Oh, Finhas is posting something here about Zerubbabel. I'm not sure. I don't know a lot about Zerubbabel. I heard his name many times, but I should definitely look into it. Why not a Samaritan Tanakh, like your vision of the history? I'm not sure what you mean here, Pablo. Why not a Samaritan Tanakh, like your version of the history? If you mean like by what should the book be about, sure. Yeah, I don't want to lose the language. Got to keep up with life. That's a good idea to get it out. Yeah, something like that. The chronicle. So I think we're kind of like almost coming to the end of the live stream, guys. I think I have like a few things more to share. So one thing I want to know in the future of what kind of videos I want to include in the channel, and second, I want to make it clear, like, this channel was never made to kind of like prove anything. It was definitely made to prove we're not a cult, maybe, but I mean, some people might think we're few, we might be a cult or something. We don't believe that. We believe that we are a nation that just happened to barely survive. For example, like from the Christian times, sorry, not the Christian times, like the ancient times, there were Canaanites that were believed to have lived among the Samaritans too, but we don't see any Canaanites around the world today, do we? So, but Samaritans managed to barely make it through, is what I mean. So it's interesting that we made it out barely. All right, guys, if you have any other suggestions, any questions, feel free always to comment on YouTube channels on YouTube. I always check the questions. I try to reply. Sometimes I don't, but don't take it personal. Maybe I just didn't make time. Also, some of the questions you sent on the first post, I've recorded them for the next book. If you have any suggestions for what the name of the book should be, although you might have not read it, I think that makes the question harder. But do give me an idea. One time, this tourist came to the museum, and she was like, "So, what are you gonna name the book?" That was 2 years ago, and I like that's when I started thinking about the book. And she was like, "What are you gonna name the book?" And I was like, "I don't know." And she was like, "Come and see." And I was like, "Wow, it's a beautiful name." Although I did find out that there are some books out there that has this name already used, but I thought about something that she said, "Come and see," which kind of means that she came and saw something that might have opened her eye. So maybe that's something of that meaning, that she came to the mountain and she saw interesting things. So do we have a Samaritan PDF? Do we have a PDF on Samaritan Halakha? Not that I'm aware of, but there are some Samaritans that are working on some really interesting applications, like really apps for Android and iPhone. And they will definitely have some interesting things like this one, like the PDF. So, all right, guys. The original plan was actually me sharing the screen and also searching a few interesting things, but it didn't work out this time. Technical issue with YouTube not allowing me to share from a streaming program. But I think I will leave this live for viewing after. And thank you all for coming up and watching and chatting. Maybe we'll do this again soon. And I have, I want to also make it clear that the channel is not necessarily only going to be about Samaritans. I'm interested to learn more about other things, other cultures, science, even. I'm just very passionate about learning, so that's all. If you're wondering what this is, I'm sure some of you know it's mate, yerba mate. Although it's a little bit late to drink this now, but I just love the drink. And if you like alcohol, try arak. I don't like alcohol that much, but one glass of arak every Shabbat here or there maybe is not that bad, I guess. So, food videos. I would love to make food videos, like tahini with many recipes. All right, here's a quick recipe before I go that you can try with tahini. Maybe you already know it. It's actually bringing an avocado, crushing it really good so that it looks like what's known as like guacamole. Then you add a few tahini, like a couple of tahini spoons, not so much. And then you just, mix that with a little bit of salt, water, and lemon, a lot of lemon, and then you get like green hummus. Try that. Do I play video games? I used to play more, but yeah, I do play from here and there. Zokon, do you play video games? I tried a few games, yeah. Although there's this documentary on YouTube that some people saw me playing in, and they were like, "Oh, this guy is rude. He's being interviewed and playing video games." Truth is, they asked me to do it, and I was like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" But cool. Call of Duty Warzone. It's a good game. Where can we find your tahini? You can find it near. Can you find it near Texas? I don't think so. It's more in New York now. If you're talking about the U.S., Har Bracha tahini. So it's a really good tahini. I mean, it's granted. I mean, even though it's for my family, but I'm not saying it's good. It's just only for my family. You need to try it yourself to know. So, all right, guys, I have to go for now. Hope you enjoyed the stream, and we'll update you soon on some interesting videos coming up. That was fun. Thank you for watching. Have a nice one.